Welcome to the AEN Stories channel.
I used to think the hospital taught me everything I needed to know about pressure, the endless beeping of monitors, the code blues at 2 a.m., the way you have to keep your hands steady even when your own heart is sprinting. But nothing in med school, nothing in the ER, prepared me for the sound of my wife's lies breaking through my life. My name's Michael. I turned 40 last year, and I've been a physician for over a decade. I spend most of my waking hours inside a hospital, patching people back together, keeping heartbeats steady that want to quit. I'm the kind of guy you'd pass at a grocery store and peg as a doctor, maybe tired eyes, pressed shirt even when I don't mean to, hands that look calm but don't know how to stay still. When my mother had her stroke 5 years ago, she moved in with me for a while. I'd make her tea in the mornings, wheel her to therapy appointments between shifts, read her the newspaper out loud when her speech came slow. She's better now, still a limp in her step, but her smile returned. She taught me as a kid that medicine was a calling, not a career. So when she needed me, it wasn't a question. I just showed up. Rachel and I married when I was 32 and she was 27. At first, she was the type of woman who filled a room, quick with a laugh, always ready with a story. Around the neighbors, she was the picture-perfect wife, bringing cookies to block parties, complimenting everyone's lawn, making sure our son, Ethan, was dressed like a catalog kid. People used to tell me, "You're lucky, Michael. She's a gem." And for a while, I believed it, but in private, cracks started to show. She'd sigh when I left for another night shift. She'd complain to her best friend on the phone, not knowing I could hear through the thin drywall. "He's married to his work," she said once. "I feel invisible." I wanted to tell her I wasn't choosing work over her. I was choosing patients who would die without me, choosing bills that had to be paid, choosing a life that didn't collapse, but I didn't. Instead, I tried to make it up with dinners out when I could, weekend trips, little things to say, "I see you." Apparently, someone else saw her better. I didn't find out from a text or by catching her in some cliché moment. No, the first crack in the facade came from a credit company. I was in the doctor's lounge between rounds when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. "Mr. Anderson," the voice said, polite but firm, "your wife's account is past due. Would you like to make a payment arrangement?" I froze. "Account? What account?" That's when I learned Rachel had been taking out loans. Small ones at first, then bigger, stacking them like sandbags against a flood I didn't even know existed. Jewelry stores, restaurants I'd never eaten at, charges that didn't fit the life we lived. I thought it had to be a mistake, some kind of identity theft, but when I confronted her, she didn't deny it. She stared at the floor, her arms crossed, and said, "I just wanted to feel alive again." Alive. As if the life we built, a son, a home, a career that kept the lights on, wasn't enough. The truth unraveled quick after that. The colleague from her office, the dinners, the gifts, the loans weren't for survival, they were for romance, the kind she decided she deserved more than the vows she'd spoken. I told my parents, ashamed like I was the one who had failed. My mom cried, my dad clenched his jaw so tight I thought it might break. They'd always called me the steady one, the son they could count on. To watch them look at me with pity, it was worse than any overnight in the ER. Rachel's parents didn't want to talk. Her mom said, "We don't want to get involved." Her dad stopped answering my calls. It was her brother, Jason, who said what nobody else would, "You did everything for her, Michael." She blew it. She ruined it herself. By then, the damage was too deep. Trust doesn't heal like a broken bone. There's no cast for betrayal. The divorce papers came quick. I didn't fight for Rachel, I fought for Ethan. My boy was 8 then, quiet but observant, the kind of kid who builds Lego towers carefully and notices when you're sad even if you don't say it out loud. I wasn't about to let his world get swallowed by lies and late fees. After the storm, life settled into a different rhythm. Work didn't stop. The hospital still needed me, but I added something new, teaching. A medical college in town asked if I'd take on a class of residents. Standing in front of them, chalk in hand, I realized I had more to give than just hours in the ER. I had experience, stories, the kind of lessons textbooks don't carry. It didn't fix the betrayal, but it gave me purpose again. And in the quiet of my house, with Ethan asleep down the hall, that was enough. Hospitals teach you how to move through chaos, get the airway, stop the bleeding, stabilize. Home doesn't come with that algorithm. After the call from the credit company, after Rachel admitted there was someone from work, our house turned into a waiting room. Every conversation was a magazine you don't want to read. The first night, I made spaghetti because it's what I make when my hands need a task. Ethan forked noodles, eyes on me the way kids watch weather. "You okay, Dad?" he asked, like it was a vital sign. "I'm okay," I said. I wasn't. I added, "We're okay," and meant it like a promise I'd have to learn how to keep. Rachel came in late, cheeks flushed in a way that didn't belong to winter. She took a plate, ate standing at the counter, and kept her phone face down. When Ethan went to brush his teeth, I said, "We're going to have to figure out the loans." She stared at the backsplash, jaw tight. "I'll handle it." "With what money?" I asked. She didn't answer. The overhead light hummed. Somewhere in the house the furnace kicked on and rattled a vent like a reminder of what still worked. "Rachel," I said, soft because I know what it is to be scolded by alarms. "What are we doing?" "I don't know," she said, louder than the room should have allowed. "I don't feel seen, Michael." "You're gone. You come home empty." She stopped herself. "I feel alive." I thought of the word on the phone with the lender. Alive. People crawling back from purple into pink. Alive as pressure on a carotid and air through a tube. It isn't jewelry on a table at a restaurant. I only knew because we drove past it on the way to soccer practice. "I saved lives," I said. "If that makes me empty to you, I don't know what full looks like." We slept in the same house, not the same room. I lay awake listening to the sounds I'd catalogued over the years. The fridge cycling, Ethan turning in his sheets, the neighbor's dog barking at a shadow. The quiet above me was louder than any code blue. The next morning, I called my bank and asked to freeze every card. I pulled our credit to see the damage. It wasn't a disaster, yet. A handful of lines, staggered, manageable if handled like a bleed you can compress. I made a spreadsheet I didn't want, set up payment plans I resented, and canceled a weekend trip I'd booked months back to surprise Ethan with spring training games in Arizona. He took the news with a shrug that hurt more than tears. "We can watch highlights," he said. "It's cheaper." I hugged him longer than I meant to. I asked Rachel to sit with me that evening, coffee mugs between us like a truce. "We need to talk about how we're living," I said, and then I stopped, because I heard the sentence the way a patient hears, "We need to talk about your scans." She cut me off. "I can't have this conversation again. We haven't had it yet," I said. "We've had arguments. We haven't had a plan." She pressed her palms to her eyes. "I can't be married to a man who thinks plans fix everything." "It's literally my job," I said, and immediately wished I'd chosen different words. She stood up, pushed the chair in too hard, and said, "I'm staying at my sister's for a few days." She went upstairs, packed like she was late, and hugged Ethan in the doorway like a scene she wanted witnesses for. Then she left. After the door closed, Ethan held his breath the way kids do when they're trying not to cry. I put a hand on his shoulder. "We'll keep the schedule," I said. He nodded and went to his room to build a Lego set that looked like an impossible city. I washed 3 clean plates because I needed the noise. My parents came the next day. Mom brought soup and that look only mothers can carry, half mercy, half worry you did this to yourself. Dad said little, the way men who've seen enough say little. He sat at my table, looked at my spreadsheet, and nodded. "We'll get through," he said. It wasn't cheerleading. It was a veteran report from a war. I guess every long marriage fights at least once. Rachel's brother, Jason, called that night. "You want me to talk to her?" he asked. "No," I said. "Talk to me." He did. "You're doing the right things," he said. "I told her what I think." He paused. "She won't hear it yet." "How do I help her hear?" I asked, knowing the answer and hating it. "You don't," he said. "You build what you can reach. The rest is weather." It's useful having a brother-in-law who's more foreman than philosopher. I slept better after that, like someone had steady-handed the ladder I was on. At the hospital, I kept moving. Blood doesn't wait for your personal life to clarify. A teen came in gray after a fentanyl-laced party. We brought him back. An older man decided the chest pressure he'd had for a week was probably gas until it wasn't. I put in a line. I watched the strip go from steamy drama to dull normal. I wrote notes. I taught an intern how to talk to a mother gently when the news can't be softened. Word got around that I might take a teaching slot. The chair of medicine cornered me in the hallway. "We need you one afternoon a week," she said. "Your residents quote you to me without knowing they're doing it." "What do they quote?" I asked. "Treat the patient, not the monitor," she said, smiling. "And, you can't transfuse character." I laughed. "I stole both of those from my own attendings." "Good," she said. "Keep thieving." "Thursday at 3? "Thursday at 3, I said, and realized that saying yes to one new thing felt better than saying no to everything else. Rachel texted once after she left. "Ethan okay?" "Yes," I wrote. "Homework done." "He ate." "Tell him I love him," she wrote. "Tell him yourself," I typed, then deleted, then wrote, "I will." Ethan asked when she'd be home. I said, "Soon." He didn't ask for a number. He's my son. The next week, I stood in front of 10 residents in a chalk-dusted classroom that smelled like coffee and fluorescent lights. I drew a heart and a set of lungs like my med school anatomy professor used to, badly, and talked about the stuff journals can't teach, which family member to look at when you say the hard sentence, how to stand in a room so you're solid even when you shake inside, why you should eat lunch before 11 a.m. if you want lunch at all. They wrote more than they needed to. One of them, a woman with a steady gaze and a name tag that said K. Patel, asked, "How do you leave work at the door?" "You don't," I said. You learn which parts to carry home. The rest sits in the locker with your white coat. I paused. I'm still learning. After class, I sat alone and breathed in a way I hadn't in months. The hospital can use you up. Teaching gave back a piece of me I thought I'd lost. Rachel came by the house that Friday to see Ethan. I stayed in the kitchen, chopping carrots with unnecessary precision. She stood in the doorway like a visitor in her own life. I'll take him for ice cream, she said. He's finishing homework, I said. 15 minutes. She waited at the island, hands in her coat pockets. Her eyes scanned the room like she wanted to pick a fight and couldn't find the right shelf to pull it from. You froze my cards, she said, not a question. Yes, I said. We're not funding whatever this is. She looked away. You think you're so moral? No, I said. I think I'm trying to keep the roof on. She took Ethan out. They came back sticky and quiet. He went to his room to show her a drawing he'd made. She left 20 minutes later. I'll call, she said. I nodded. She didn't. I met with a therapist because the hospital HR pamphlet in the lounge said I should, and because I tell patients to accept help and I am not a hypocrite. The guy had warm eyes and a chair that didn't squeak. What are you afraid of? He asked. Ruining Ethan, I said. Too fast. What do you control? He asked. Breakfast, I said, surprising myself. Bedtime. The tone of my voice. Start there, he said. A child's sense of safety is built out of boring. I laughed, then didn't. She called me boring, I said, like it was a diagnosis. It is, he said. It's also a compliment, if you're 8. I walked out lighter. It didn't change the facts. It changed my posture. 2 weeks after she left, Rachel asked to talk. We met at a coffee shop far from the hospital in our neighborhood, where we could be 2 people in a room instead of a story on someone's porch. She wore the sweater I bought her last Christmas. She kept fiddling with the cuff. I'm sorry, she said. She didn't look sorry. She looked scared. For what? I asked. Because specificity matters. For lying, she said. For the loans. For him. I nodded and waited. It's a physician's trick. Silence as an instrument. I don't know how to fix this, she said. You don't, I said. We do, or we don't. I sipped coffee I didn't need. But there are steps. Like a plan, she said, bitterness stinging the word. Like guardrails, I offered. We separate for real. We tell Ethan the truth that belongs to him and nothing more. We stop spending money we don't have. We keep our voices low. We protect the boy who didn't ask for any of this. She nodded. I can do that, she said. I can do that, I said. We told Ethan together on a Sunday afternoon while the laundry hummed. We're going to live in different houses, I said. You'll have 2 rooms to decorate. Mom and Dad both love you. That doesn't change. He looked at the floor, then at us. Who's moving out? He asked. I am, Rachel said. For now. She stroked his hair. He flinched, just a little, like a reflex he hadn't learned yet. He nodded. Can we still watch the game on Thursdays? He asked me. Of course, I said, as if I could control Thursdays forever. After he went to his room, Rachel handed me a stack of envelopes from the drawer by the stove. Statements, late notices, the truth in Helvetica. I'll get a job, she said. A real one. I'll start paying it back. I hope you do, I said. For you. She left with a small suitcase and the last of her jewelry that was actually hers. I stood in the doorway and watched her car pull out, turn left, disappear. The house adjusted its weight around me. I did the same. That night, I set out Ethan's breakfast dishes before I went to bed. Bowl, spoon, a post-it that said cereals in the blue container. I'll make eggs if you want them. Love, Dad. When I woke up, the bowl was in the sink, the post-it on the fridge, the pen line pressed hard like someone wanted the words to stay. On Thursday at 3, I walked back into the classroom with a case study about chest pain that wasn't cardiac and grief that was. The residents argued differential. I told them the diagnosis didn't matter if they missed the patient. After, one of them asked, how do you know when you're doing it right? You don't, I said. You know when you're doing your best. Some days that's all you get. On the drive home, I felt the kind of tired that isn't despair. It's the tired of someone who put the day where it goes. I pulled into the driveway and saw my mother on the porch with Ethan, teaching him how to knit. Her new rehab trick for her fingers. He rolled his eyes and tried anyway. He looked up, saw me, and grinned the grin that makes everything else make sense. Hey, Dad, he said. Grandma says I'm terrible at scarves. She's ruthless, I said. She learned from you, Mom said, smiling. We went inside and started dinner. I cut carrots too uniformly again. Ethan set the table, forks all facing the same direction, and my mother hummed a church song she pretends she forgot. It wasn't fixed. It was held. Sometimes that's the better thing. Rachel's absence became a rhythm faster than I expected. The house settled into new grooves. Cereal bowls in the morning, carpool with Ethan, shuttle shifts at the hospital, Thursdays with residents. What was missing was loud at first, then quieter, Like a radio you leave on in another room until one day you notice it's gone. Ethan adapted with the resilience only kids can summon. He asked fewer questions than I deserved and more than I could answer. "Will mom come home?" he asked one night while brushing his teeth. "She'll always be your mom," I said carefully, "but we're figuring out different homes." He spit into the sink, wiped his mouth, and said, "Then I get 2 Christmases?" He tried to smile. I hugged him, because sometimes the only answer is presence. Rachel texted occasionally, "How's Ethan? Can I see him Friday?" She didn't mention money, didn't mention the other man, but one afternoon an envelope arrived, no return address. Inside, a gold bracelet with a jeweler's logo and no note. Ethan was at school, so I called Rachel. "Did you send this?" I asked. She sighed. "It was a gift from him. I didn't know he wants to make things right. Buying you trinkets with someone else's credit doesn't make it right," I said. "Don't bring this into our mailbox again." Silence. Then, "I'm trying, Michael." "Try harder where it matters," I said, and hung up. I put the bracelet in a drawer and forgot it. Or tried to. At work, teaching became oxygen. Residents started dropping by my office after shifts, not for medical advice, but for life advice. How to tell a spouse you missed another dinner. How to manage the ache after losing a patient. How to remember you're human when your badge says MD. One night, Patel, the resident with steady eyes, stayed after everyone left. "Do you ever feel like you give your best to strangers and come home empty?" she asked. "Yes," I said honestly, "but sometimes home is the reason you can give your best at all." She nodded, wrote it down. I didn't realize I'd just written something I needed to hear myself. Rachel's fallout spread wider. Her parents stopped calling, ashamed and tired. Her brother Jason texted me updates. She moved into a 1-bedroom. She's working at a boutique. She says she wants to fix things with Ethan. I didn't block the door. I set boundaries. Visits on weekends, calls at bedtime. I listened for signs of danger but kept my face neutral for Ethan's sake. The first supervised visit, Rachel brought Ethan a new backpack, brand name, expensive. "For school," she said brightly. He looked at it, then at me. "I already have one," he said. "You can switch," she said. He shook his head. "I like mine. Dad got it." The air turned brittle. Rachel blinked too fast. I cleared my throat. "He's fine, Rach. Let's not make this about stuff." Meanwhile, my parents carried us in ways I'll never stop being grateful for. Mom made meals. Dad fixed things I hadn't noticed were broken. Ethan thrived in their presence, board games, bedtime stories, the kind of steady affection that makes a child's world feel safe even as the ground shifts under him. Late one night, Dad and I sat on the porch. "You did everything right, and still this," I said, not a question. "Son," he said, "doing everything right doesn't mean you get everything you wanted. It means when it all falls apart, you're still standing." I thought about that long after he went to bed. Weeks blurred into months. Rachel texted less, called sporadically. Ethan stopped asking when she'd be home. One evening, while he colored at the kitchen table, he said, "Dad, I don't think Mom likes living here." I swallowed. "She made different choices," I said. He pressed harder with his crayon. "I like it here." I ruffled his hair. "Me too, buddy." And for the first time in a long while, I meant it without reservation. The divorce papers became final in spring. A court clerk slid them across the counter like they were no heavier than a takeout menu. I signed, paid the fee, and walked out into the Ohio sunlight with a folder under my arm and a weight off my chest I hadn't realized I was still carrying. Rachel didn't show up that day. She didn't need to. Her absence had been the loudest part of our marriage for years. Ethan and I marked the occasion without ceremony. Pizza on the couch, an old baseball game on TV. He leaned against me, crust crumbs on his shirt, and asked if I was okay. "Yeah, bud," I said, better than okay, because it was true. Work steadied me in ways therapy might have if I'd sought it sooner. In the ER, I learned that broken things don't fix themselves. In the classroom, I learned that passing on wisdom is its own kind of healing. The residents started calling me Doc Steady, half joke, half truth. I didn't mind. I'd take steady over charming any day. Charm fades, steady builds. One evening after rounds, Patel left me a note on my desk. "Thank you for reminding me this work matters. You saved more than patients this year." I folded it into my wallet and carried it next to Ethan's school photo. Rachel's story unraveled elsewhere. Jason told me she broke things off with a colleague, then another relationship after that. Creditors kept circling. She asked to see Ethan less often, and then almost not at all. I didn't celebrate her decline, but I didn't chase her either. You can't save someone determined to drown in shallow water. Ethan noticed. "Kids always do. Mom forgets a lot," he said once, staring at his half-finished math homework. "Yeah," I said softly, "but you're not forgotten." "Not by me." He nodded, set his pencil down, and hugged me without another word. The real turning point came not in a courtroom or a hospital, but in a classroom. I was mid-lecture on cardiac emergencies when a student asked, "Drive, Anderson, how do you keep doing this?" The hours, the pressure, the loss. I paused, chalk in hand, and thought about Rachel, the loans, the betrayal. Thought about Ethan's backpack, my dad's words on the porch, my mom's casseroles, my son's crayon drawings taped to the fridge. "Because somebody has to," I said finally, "and because every life saved is proof the fight was worth it, even when the rest of your life isn't perfect." Silence. Then scribbling pens. I realized in that moment I wasn't just teaching medicine, I was teaching survival. By the time I turned 41, my life looked nothing like the blueprint Rachel and I had drawn. Smaller house, quieter nights, no shiny vacations. But Ethan laughed more. I slept better. The ground under my feet felt solid again. One Saturday morning, he handed me a drawing, stick figures, a house, a stethoscope on one figure's chest. "That's you," he said proudly. "You help people." "You help me." I taped it to the fridge. It's still there. Here's what I know now: love isn't measured by sparks or gifts. It's measured by who stays steady when everything else tilts. Rachel chose noise and novelty. I chose silence and rebuilding. And I came out not with revenge, but with something better: respect. From my son, from my students, from myself. I used to think the ER was the hardest place in the world. Turns out, the hardest place is your own kitchen table, staring at the ruins of a life you built with someone who stopped believing. But if you keep showing up, steady, patient, present, you realize ruins aren't the end. They're the foundation. And that's where I started again. Thank you for listening my story. If you want more raw, real, and gripping stories like this one, subscribe to the AEN Stories channel. Your support keeps these stories alive.